Hello, it's Evelyn coming to you with a little bit of wisdom along with the new moon and the solar eclipse in Gemini last night. So by way of introduction, I'm going to talk about that eclipse. I'm also going to talk about Mercury in retrograde. It is conjunct the sun and the moon, giving extraordinary power to communications, but confused because Neptune's in Pisces and making a square aspect to all three and not making things clear at times. I have some suggestions for you for going forward, some useful plans going forward, rather than focusing on the doom and gloom we get on the news, on television or the radio. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about meditation, because it's really meant for you to create an inner silence so that the voice of the Creator can be heard. So let's talk about the new moon we had last night and the solar eclipse, just 2 weeks after the lunar eclipse that we were able to see here in Australia. Now, unless you were in the Arctic Circle, you wouldn't have seen this solar eclipse, which was where the moon's shadow is between the Earth and the sun. But if you live near the Arctic Circle, your chances would have been good. Good on the polar bears. Right? But you know, just because we can't see it doesn't detract from its power. Remember that the power of your intentions that you set around the time of the new moon are much stronger at this time because of the eclipse. So ensure that you set your intentions that are within your power to control, because there's so many disturbing influences over which you have no control. Astrologically, we also have Mercury in retrograde conjunct the sun and moon, giving extraordinary power to communications. But it can be a bit confused because Neptune in Pisces is creating a square aspect to the sun, moon and Gemini and Mercury, and it may make your emotions sort of say, well, you know, I don't feel that what you're saying is right, or I don't think what you're thinking is okay. So you're going to have your logic telling you one credible story, but your emotions are be contradicting your thoughts. Remember, you've got choices, always. The stories that are coming in from the mainstream media are very confusing, and there are many different versions of reality that's happening in this crazy world. So I'm suggesting that at this time when we've got this Mercury retrograde, give yourself time to clarify the issues. Don't take any course of action just yet. The best thing you can do is choose an attitude according to your feelings. What does your gut tell you? Find a quiet place to sit and contemplate and find solutions for yourself. Retrograde Mercury is a very good time for reviewing your plans and ideas, sorting out your tax data if you haven't done that already, reorganizing your files, reorganizing your wardrobe, reorganizing, reviewing, also reviewing the stories that are coming in about the vaccinations. We're getting conflicting information from the health authorities and from other people who had experiences. Just review. If you don't have to do anything just yet, just wait. Just wait. An eclipse often can reveal what is hidden. And just this week, I've heard that in Australia, Scott Morrison reported that a global sting against organised crime syndicates has led to hundreds of people being arrested worldwide. and is a watershed moment in Australian law enforcement history. Now, this has occurred in the space between the eclipses, which has a reputation for hidden affairs being exposed. Is this all true? Have all these people really been arrested? Or is this a distraction from other news which would be more interesting? I don't know. What do you think? What's happening in the USA? The astrological energy indicates that more will be uncovered before the end of this month. There's an expectation in some quarters that the following could occur and more. The Three Gorges Dam could break. Now, that's not in America, that's in China. And that could take with it the big pharma labs, CIA, Bitcoin servers. Really? There could be a black swan event of the stock market and Bitcoin crashes. The Durham report release, FISA release, and release of Arizona 2020 election audit. Now, all these things are possible. Will they happen? Is this more doom and gloom from the other side of the story? We shall wait and see. And these events could very easily be triggered by the eclipse. Donald Trump also has a birthday, and his sensitive points are impacted by the planetary transits. And so there will no doubt be news of his activity, despite the fact he's banned on social media. Just we wait and prepare to respond positively to whatever events occur. Now, are you really in fear? Is all this making you fearful? Can you focus your energy on something positive? You must be aware that the current unpredictable actions by governments is causing huge distress because it does create uncertainty. And as human beings, we don't like this uncertainty. We psychologically feel really disrupted and discombobulated. It's a big word, but it just really means we're not feeling happy. We're feeling uncertain about what's going to happen, and that makes us perhaps it creates digestive issues and may incline us to do silly things. We just don't feel that we're in control anymore. Because this uncertainty screws with people's minds. And so what you do is you go with the agenda because it's easier than resisting, even if the resistance is not comfortable. Can you see how this can lead to control of the population? You can be controlled by outside forces, and you're unaware of that control. Are you being controlled by outside forces? Or are you exercising your ability as a sovereign being to make your own choices? What I'm observing occurring in Victoria disturbs me, as I'm sure it disturbs many, many others, most of all those people living there. And what I see bears so much resemblance to the behaviour of those in authority just prior to World War in Europe. The population has become comfortable and trusting, and they're simply bamboozled into accepting restrictions which are painful, mentally damaging, and in some cases against our Australian Constitution. To some extent, we have been cleverly programmed to believe that our power lies in external sources. Our teachers, our gurus, our doctors, government officials, and so on. What about our innate wisdom? We are actually powerful beings, and the answers for each of us lies within ourselves. How amazing. We can certainly listen to the opinion of others, Mercury and Gemini energy, but ultimately we need to go in here and process all that information that we gather and make our own decisions that benefit us as well as our community by listening to this voice within. How can we respond? Protests are all very well, but I have to ask, how much value are they really when in Australia, in brackets Victoria, there are foreign forces, non-Australian forces, enforcing the local laws? And are those forces treating our citizens with respect or utter contempt? We can choose to be non-compliant, which has its own risks. And we can choose to be compliant, which also has its risks. And each of us has to decide the course of action that's most appropriate for yourself. I've heard whispers that without the population being aware, Canada might also be in a police state. What do you know? In Australia, we have our constitutional structure and a political system that enables us to choose our own representatives. Do you realise that if enough smart and passionate people gathered together and found intelligent, articulate candidates to stand as independent representatives, there is a chance things can change? While we have political systems that have become increasingly corrupt, it's very difficult to alter the course of our future by choosing a candidate from any of the established political parties. Just saying. Maybe you have some ideas. I spoke briefly about earthquakes last time, and it's interesting, I haven't heard, not that I listen to the mainstream media very much, but I haven't heard much about earthquakes anywhere. They're happening. They have the potential, as you know, to cause great damage and disruption and force a new way forward. And in some way, this would be an expected expression of the energy of Uranus, the maverick, and the disruptor in the Taurus, which represents the energy of the earth. So how much have you heard about earthquakes recently? Perhaps you should Google the latest earthquake data and see, you might be quite surprised. And this is simply the earth, Taurus, making adjustments to the changing energy, Uranus. Do any of you live in New South Wales, where you've got these little furry rodents under your feet? You know there's a mouse plague in New South Wales. And this is creating carpets of mice, particularly if the farmer goes out to investigate at night. Apparently, a mouse plague is not uncommon after an El Niño event, when there are good seasonal rains. And we've had fabulous rains over the last 12 months. And I suspect energetically that we're going to have another season of really good rains. And this is what happened. The farmer says, oh, great, there's rains, beautiful crops, and we'll make the most of the rains. We'll bring in these crops, we'll store them, store the grain, so we've got food for our animals, for our supplies for a longer period of time. And then come along these little critters, and they eat everything, and they poo and wee everywhere, and they contaminate the hay and the grain. It must be soul destroying to be a farmer in that situation. So why am I mentioning this? Apart from drawing our attention to those in our community, our farmers, who are struggling not only with the health dilemma that we're all struggling with, but also with these furry critters. think about the source of our food, our fresh food. Winter in Australia is traditionally a time when fresh food is expensive due to diminished quantities, unless you grow your own. But if these farmers are growing wheat and grains, is a shortage of edible wheat likely to increase the base price of flour and hence the price of bread and so much else that's made with flour? In America, the rural areas are dealing with other issues relating to monoculture, soil degradation, as where they're growing the same crops in the same soil year after year after year, and alleged control of their crops by large agricultural companies, resulting in food shortages in that country. What else is going on elsewhere? I ask you, what happens when you, living in an urban area, or even just slightly on the edges of town, manage to grow some of your own food? Use pots, small bits of ground, or bigger patches of ground to grow herbs, green leafy veggies, or anything else you can grow that is delicious and you like. I encourage you to find a space to grow some of your own food. Not only can you enjoy the flavour of freshly produced produce, but you might have some to share with your neighbours. I love sharing my bits of product from the garden with my neighbours. And have you considered filling the pantry with good stores of staples like rice, chickpeas, nuts, beans, maybe some whole pumpkins, maybe some whole sweet potatoes, and tinned products of all sorts? If you have a good store in your pantry, say enough for 3 weeks, and there are issues with food supply, you'll be able to eat, and you may also be able to share some with your neighbour. Fill your freezer also. But what happens if there's a power outage? Now, I am not suggesting that there will be issues with food, power, fuel, and so on. But you know, I was a Girl Guide and we were taught to be prepared. We are living in uncertain times. Make sure there's food in the house for several weeks. I'm also considering the astrological indications, pardon me, with many planets going retrograde, that suggest that the next 3 or 4 months may be tough, not necessarily with basic supplies, but also with the behaviour of those in positions of power and control. In early October, all planets again return to a forward motion, and the energy looks a little bit more positive. So what can we do? This is not all good news. I've talked many times about meditation, and many of you already meditate. And you know, the purpose of the meditation is to create an inner silence so that the voice of the Creator can be heard. I find my best meditation time is in the morning, before I get distracted by what happens during the day. And I've been listening also to David Wilcock, who has much wisdom to share, despite the fact he's got many words he uses. And recently he describes 3 methods of meditation, which I'm going to share with you. But any method requires that you sit in a quiet place with a straight back. The first is a purely contemplative practice. So calm the body, take in some deep breaths, and simply focus on breathing in and out to begin. Allow your thoughts to float in and out like clouds in the sky. Acknowledge them and let them drift off. A second method David describes is concentrated meditation, where he claims that even reading a book can qualify because it takes you out of your present situation. You may want to also, or you may want to try repeating a phrase describing how you might like to experience the world. For example, I breathe freely and easily. Everything is in perfect harmony. Create some words that work for you and keep repeating them so that your mind is focused on the same thing. The third method he talks about is where you focus on mentally describing, and by describing I mean drawing a circle or a triangle or a square in your mind and focusing on that shape. What do you think? If you'd like some more information, let me know and we can have some discussions. There's many, many forms of meditation and you have to find something that works for you. So with that, I'm going to leave you this time. Enjoy the effects of the solar eclipse. Watch and wait. You don't have to move very quickly. You don't have to make quick decisions. Wait until you feel clear about your decision before taking action. Till next time, bye for now.